Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Tom Fain, and I'm the chief judge or senior judge, I guess they call it, for this proceeding. I am also a retired securities lawyer. I will now ask the judges, beginning with Hal, to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Hal Huffer, and I'm now retired, but I have executive experience in accounting investigations, in fraud prevention, and in advisory on public relations issues when it comes to management policies. And my background, I was public relations director of Coldwell Banker, which is a, when it was public, a large real estate firm. Petrolane, I was the public relations director for an international company that was engaged in gas and oil. And then later on with other companies. And finally, I ended up as a management consultant for publicly held companies. And that's my background.
Lynn?
Hi, I'm Lynn Zarcaro. I'm the Regional Ethics and Compliance Officer for Collins Aerospace, which was a part of Raytheon Technologies. I've been in this role for about 6 years, and I have all of North and South America, so about 100 sites under my umbrella. I've been with this company and this corporation for 38 years. And my background really goes into procurement, supply chain, and I was the director of contracts for our space business and our aftermarket business for many years before taking on this role. I started right out of college, so I've had this one employer and it's been wonderful. It's been a great ride.
Okay, would the team please introduce themselves?
My name is Vikram Singh.
And it says you're some kind of specialist up there, but I can't read it.
Yeah, I mean, that pertains to the presentation. I'm the public-private partnership specialist for this presentation.
Okay, who's next?
My name is Zachary Cashman. I'm going to be the regional specialist for this presentation.
My name is Shreya Venkat, and I'm the strategic overview for this presentation.
My name is Morgan Crandall, and I'm our Armenia specialist for this presentation.
Okay, as your senior judge, I have the obligation to read you kind of an opening statement. I'm sure that you all know this already, but since it's part of the protocol, I'll go ahead and behave myself and read it for you. As part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. You will have 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all 3 counts. During your presentation, you will not be interrupted. When you are finished, the judges will ask you questions, if they have any, for about 10 or 15 minutes. If we don't have any questions, do not be dismayed or disgruntled, because that may be because you did such a wonderful job that we have no questions. After the questions, there will be a feedback session in which we give you some criticism, positive or negative, as the case may be, of your presentation, and that will conclude the program. So whoever's going to begin yours, now's the time.
All right, so I'll get it started off right now. Hello, we are Varuna Consulting. My name is Vikram Singh. This is Shreya Venkat, Zachary Cashman, and Morgan Crandall. Here at Varuna Consulting, we place high importance on our company values of social justice, sustainable business, and ethical leadership. This is why we are talking to you, the Bisleri Executive Board, today, as we believe that our values align with your ambitious desire to meet the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
The UN has 17 goals to be accomplished by 2030, aimed at helping nations around the world develop their economies while protecting their land. Our proposal focuses on their goals for clean water and sanitation, which includes objectives such as achieving universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water, and their goals for industry, innovation, and infrastructure, which includes objectives like developing quality, reliable, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure to support economic development and human well-being, with a focus on affordable and equitable access for all.
To accomplish these UN Sustainable Development Goals, we wanted to focus on water and India. In India, 88 million people lack access to clean water, and over 21 major cities are expected to run out of groundwater within the next couple of years. We see water access in India not just as an issue of sustainability and equitability, but we see access to water as a human right and a human need. Unfortunately, for many parts of the world, water access is not guaranteed. So that's why in this presentation, we're going to be focusing on the state of Kerala, India, that is going to be a prime example of what India can do and throughout the state of Kerala. In Kerala, there is a persistent water crisis. Kerala is experiencing a severe groundwater shortage where they've lost up to 4 meters of water since 2018. 12 out of the 14 districts in Kerala are lacking access to clean drinking water. Right now, water is being brought in for households, providing about 150 liters of water for 3 days. The average person uses 150 liters of water in just 1 day. For example, a bath can take up to 300 liters of water. A way to fix this issue is by building infrastructure such as a clean water pipeline to the state of Kerala. That is where you, Bisleri, come in as India's foremost water distributor.
During our research, we found that Bisleri would be the perfect company to help solve Kerala's water crisis. We looked at your vision, mission, and values before ultimately deciding that you were the best choice. Bisleri's vision is to be the dominant player in the branded water business and expand into the premium beverage category. Your mission is to have world-class quality at the lowest production and distribution costs to make them an unbeatable leader and to have satisfied, loyal customers. Your core values are integrity, teamwork, cooperation, quality, passion, openness, and transparency, which align with ours. It's clear from your vision, mission, and goals that you care a lot about the community, and you should. Bisleri should show how much they care about their community by helping the Indian government with Kerala's water crisis. As members of the community yourselves, you have a duty to help your fellow community members, especially when you have the ability to do so. We also specifically chose Bisleri because the production of plastics, including their plastic water bottles, have negative effects on the environment, which affects everyone, including Bisleri. Bisleri has a duty to limit the amount of harm they cause to the world so they can help people have access to clean water to help the community that they are hurting with the pollution caused from not only the production of plastics, but also the disposal of them too. Bisleri alone is obviously not to blame for the population or water crisis, but as you contributed to the problem, you have a moral obligation to help solve it.
Given that Bisleri has an ethical obligation to society due to the social contract theory, we are suggesting Bisleri to align with Modi's public-private partnership plan. Prime Minister Modi has made clean drinking water a top priority for his second term in office. The newly formed Jal Shakti, or Department of Water Resources, has made it clear that water must be treated by the government via public-private partnership plans. Currently, there are already 191 projects under the water sector for Indian public-private partnership plans. So there's clearly a precedent for a plan like this to be in place in Kerala, India as well. The public-private partnership would consist of a long-term contract between Bisleri and Jal Shakti for the development of public water infrastructure in Kerala, India, where responsibilities and rewards will be shared and both sectors will play to their strengths. One of the unique characteristics of public-private partnerships is the financing aspect of it. Traditionally, public infrastructure projects are financed by the national budget of a country. Usually, the government selects a contractor and pays a contractor based on the progress of project construction. This means that there are large upfront payments, as you can see on the table, during the construction phase. In PPP, private investors such as Bisleri finance the infrastructure, but they do not do it for free. They expect to generate a profit for the investment, which means that they will have to be remunerated. And there are two main ways for Bisleri to be remunerated for this water infrastructure project. The first would be through user fees, which is fees to the consumer for using the infrastructure. This would be similar to a toll on a road. If they do not want to go with the user fees, another way for Bisleri to get repaid is through availability payments. This is where Jal Shakti pays payments dependent on Bisleri meeting key performance indicators. If Bisleri does not meet these indicators, then they do not receive payment. This causes a strong incentive for sustained performance over time, and ensures that everyone is kept accountable for their actions. And most importantly, with the PPP plan, there are no upfront construction costs for the public sector, and these payments are spread out over the lifetime of the project, which is about 20 years. Another unique trait of PPPs is the duration of the contract. Traditionally, the government is only present for the construction of the infrastructure in the very beginning, and they leave when the construction is over and are no longer involved with the project. For PPP, however, Bisleri is responsible for the infrastructure for over 20 years, while the Indian government monitors the performance through the length of the project. At the end of PPP, asset rights go back to the Indian government, which is a major difference between PPP and the outright privatization of public assets. Now, while an argument could be made that a PPP limits competitiveness and the private sector could have too much power on the project, when done right, the PPP has a lot more benefits than drawbacks. The public-private partnership plan leverages the competencies, efficiencies, and capitals of Bisleri to create better water infrastructure. One key benefit is that it focuses on outputs, which is what to achieve, versus inputs, which is how to achieve. This allows the private sector, in this case Bisleri, to focus on coming up with innovative solutions to tackle the water infrastructure crisis in Kerala. Innovative solutions could lead to cost savings down the road as well. Another key benefit is risk allocation. Traditionally, risk is borne mainly by the public sector. In this case, with the PPP, risk is shared. In the beginning of the project, risk is allocated to the partner best equipped to handle it. The private sector usually supports the construction and operation risks, which allows the public sector to not be exposed to budget issues and potential cost overruns. The taxpayer itself also does not have to directly fund this project in the very beginning, which is another public benefit. Other benefits are that PPP plans tend to have faster completions and reduce delay on infrastructure projects as well, due to private innovation and less political factors or bureaucratic red tape. Finally, the return on investment is greater as there is a longer-term focus, more specifically for a 20-year span, than a short-term focus. On the next slide, you can see a big picture overview of Modi's public-private partnership plan in action with Bisleri. Bisleri will have a contract with the government to receive funding and financing from them, while also having the ability to reach out to banks to receive further loan assistance if needed. Equity investors themselves agree to the contract via a shareholders agreement, and Bisleri will reward investors via dividends. Investors themselves may be interested in Bisleri after news of a government contract, as government contracts are usually profitable and lucrative for the private sector. Finally, Bisleri enters contracts with the construction and operations contractors. These are the people who actually build the actual water infrastructure and the pipelines in Kerala. And Bisleri will provide them with capital and intellectual capital as well. Bisleri itself profits from user fees if it decides to charge them, and most likely will profit from availability payments based on sustaining the performance of the water infrastructure over a period of 20 years. Overall, this model allows for a framework of alliances and cooperation and allows every party to play to their own unique strengths.
To explore the feasibility of this partnership, we're going to take a look at an example of a successful public-private partnership with a water company. So following the collapse of the Soviet Union, Armenia's economy suffered a 50% decline in GDP, and their inflation reached over 5,000%. So the government didn't have the means to maintain the water system, and the majority of the population was receiving less than 6 hours of water a day. The World Bank sponsored a public-private partnership with some water companies in Yerevan, Armenia's capital city. Through infrastructure such as chlorination pumping systems, water meters, regulatory valves, and software that allows monitoring of pipelines, Yerevan is now able to provide 332,000 families with water for 21 hours a day. To accomplish this project, tariffs on water were increased from the equivalent of about 10 cents per cubic meter of water in 2000 to 56 cents per cubic meter in 2006. Despite this, research has shown that only about 30% of Armenia's population said that they would prefer the publicly managed water system over paying those increased tariffs. A case study conducted by faculty at Hungary's Central European University showed that Armenia's new water companies score very highly in sustainability performance relative to their status pre-privatization, and their utilities perform well on this scale internationally. When comparing Yerevan and Kerala, we can see that there is a similar lack of clean drinking water in Yerevan as there is in Kerala. Yerevan's successful public-private partnership has provided us with some key points that should be noted when creating the plan for Kerala. The government should serve as a focal point for the private operators' plans, and the private sector should be in charge of capital expenditures for the plan, while the public sector should focus on monitoring and financing the project as a whole. The plan should be implemented as early as possible to ensure adequate time to carry out the necessary work for creating the infrastructure, and the government needs to ensure that their water tariff is increased enough to allow for successful financial acquisitions. And finally, it's also a really good idea for the companies to acquire support from donors and lenders at the beginning of their partnership for additional financing.
And now for our timeline. After we build and design the contract for the PPP plan, we expect development and infrastructure implementation to take approximately 5 years. This is if we follow, of course, the same route as Armenia. Full implementation would look like everyone in Kerala having access and equitable access to water. The infrastructure repairs and improvements we're expecting to see happening around year 6. This is going to have to be maintained within the municipalities of the region, and we expect Bisleri and the local government to assist throughout this process. After the 20-year period, we would look for further evaluation to see success within this region and hopefully expand to other regions throughout India and potentially elsewhere, of course, with partnering through Bisleri.
When discussing the ethical obligations of Bisleri, it is important to stress the view of stakeholder theory. This theory argues that Bisleri should create value for all stakeholders, not just the majority shareholders. This means taking into account all employees, customers, suppliers, communities, and of course, the environment. Stakeholder theory plays a vital role in our own consultations as a firm and is reflected in our firm's values of social justice, sustainable business, and ethical leadership. Stakeholder theory plays directly into the triple bottom line, which we want to expand for Bisleri. And the triple bottom line is people, planet, and profit. In terms of our Kerala PPP project, there are several stakeholders affected, as you can see on the next slide. Bisleri provides capital and intellect for the infrastructure while also receiving goodwill from the public. As previously stated, Bisleri can also charge user fees and get availability payments from the government as well. The Indian government itself provides oversight and availability fees and payments to Bisleri, and they get to accomplish a goal set out by Prime Minister Modi and several prime ministers before him as well. Bankers are involved too if Bisleri decides to receive additional loan assistance, and investors can agree to the partnership and get to enjoy higher stock prices potentially due to a lucrative government contract. Finally, the Indian worker itself is benefited and an entire sub-economy is created. And this cannot be stressed enough as a major benefit of the PPP plan. The EPC contractors and operations and maintenance contractors will have long-term jobs that last for 20 years, and these will be lucrative jobs as well, and they have consistent employment. Finally, the Kerala public gets to enjoy consistent, reliable, and safe access to quality drinking water, which they deserve all along.
Some of the metrics that we're going to be looking for is going to be community buy-in. That's with, of course, Bisleri shareholders. We are going to be looking for reasonable price structures with the Jal Shakti government, and of course with banks and those members of the local community. Another metric of success is going to be all 14 Kerala districts having enough access for drinking water for citizens. This is going to be defined more as consumers being able to afford the cost of drinking water with effectively eliminating price gouging, so people are going to be able to afford the water that they're drinking. Bisleri will have implemented a system that is going to be more efficient than what is currently happening, and it should be profitable for the company, the stakeholders, and of course, the Indian community.
Generally speaking, public-private partnerships typically make finding funding easier since lenders are more than willing to contribute when the risk is low and the return is high, which they are with PPPs. This also takes the responsibility of funding off tax taxpayers to a certain extent. PPPs are also known to have faster completion times, which will increase the quality of life of the consumer faster, and that will bleed into other aspects of the economy as well. With the funding being taken care of by the lenders, Bisleri can reallocate funds in a more efficient way, such as looking into more eco-friendly materials to make their water bottles out of, as well as more eco-friendly ways to dispose of those bottles. Since these projects involve the government, there will be tariffs in place that both the government and Bisleri will benefit from. One of the biggest economic risks, however, is the possibility of construction scope changes, which could be very costly if they occur later on in the construction process rather than in the beginning. We conducted a SWOT analysis on public-private relationships to provide more insight into the potential partnership for Bisleri. Some of the strengths are technological innovation, financial innovation, and lower interest rates. Some of the weaknesses are public opinion and the difficulty to control revenue risk. Some of the opportunities are investment, GDP growth, and risk transfer. And some of the threats are inflation, interest rates, revenue risk, and financial risk. Looking more in depth into one of the strengths, the lower interest rates would be beneficial for Bisleri since the government is a fairly reliable investment. They don't have to pay as much in interest rates. So by having a partnership with them, Bisleri will also receive that benefit for this project. Overall, public-private relationships have many benefits that not only positively impact both the Indian government and Bisleri, but also the people of Kerala.
We expect the cost of the Kerala PPP to be similar to the Armenian PPP. As you can see on the chart itself, the appraisal cost was actually not as much as the actual cost. The actual cost of the project over a span of 20 years was $92.62 million. And to break it down even more, $18.37 million was for borrower financing, $72.51 million was for the Asian Development Bank financing, and the total implementation cost was $90.88 million. When it comes to interest during the construction costs, $1.74 million was for the Asian Development Bank financing for a total of $1.74 million. And to get even more specific on the components of the partnership plan, infrastructure investments were $88.8 million, managing improvement and development was $2 million, and financing charges during implementation was $1.7 million for a total of $92.6 million. It's very important to stress that this is not an upfront cost. This is a cost that has been spread out over a 20-year period, which is how long this plan has been in place for. Also, it's important to reiterate that Bisleri will enjoy profit, and in this case, it will enjoy a return of equity of 12 to 15%. Lenders will also receive interest rates in the range of 8 to 10%. With all that being said, we want to focus on how this plan directly affects a Kerala citizen. We already explained the financial analysis and the logistics, but now we want to spend some time to show how it will improve a person's life. So meet Maya. Before the public-private partnership plan, she did not have access to reliable, clean drinking water, and she often had to pay a premium for bottled water. This served to be an issue because in the state of Kerala and in India in general, it's very likely for price gouging to happen. So the cost of bottled water can increase and be unaffordable for the regular citizen. Now let's meet Maya after the public-private partnership plan. She'll be able to enjoy clean drinking water, and bottled water becomes a want versus a necessity. And the market forces don't impact her right to have clean drinking water either.
We're also going to look at this from a legal perspective. India is currently one of the top locations in the world for public-private partnership projects, and according to the World Bank, is one of the leading countries in terms of readiness for those PPPs. So the government established the National Public-Private Partnership Policy to assist them with handling the large volume of proposals they receive. The policy established a committee that reviews all proposals and then approves the ones that meet their standards. And it also established a broad framework that lays out the principles for implementing projects. And it seeks to facilitate expansion of projects by going across sectors. Bisleri should encounter no issues with having their project approved under these guidelines.
Bisleri can accomplish both UN goals of clean water and sanitation and industry innovation and infrastructure by aligning with Modi's public-private partnership plan in Kerala. By building a clean water pipeline infrastructure in Kerala, Bisleri will benefit with not just a return on equity, but also by solving a problem a societal problem that affects everyone. Bisleri will be able to prove yet again that they are the #1 water distribution company in India. And overall, our world will be one step closer to achieving the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. With that being said, we would like to open the floor up to any questions that you all have. Thank you for your time.
Okay, according to the established protocol for this program, as the lead judge, I am required to ask the first question. There'll be follow-on questions by the other judges if they have them. And here's my question. As I understand your presentation, the problem here is not that there's no water, it's that there's no water delivery system. Do I have that right?
Yes, the issue is a lack of a safe water pipeline system.
Okay, where's the water come from?
Well, the water comes often from the Ganges River and other sources like that. And the Ganges River is often polluted. So people will bathe and get drinking water from the river.
Okay, so I'm clear on the goal, and I'm clear on the human interest of the goal, and I'm clear on why we should provide a whole bunch of people with decent water. What I'm not clear about is if there is an ethical problem embedded in this. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would say that for Bisleri being the #1 water distribution company, the ethical standpoint is with social contract theory and stakeholder theory. They do have bottled water plants in India, which do pollute the Ganges River, and the plastics production does pollute the water and air in India. So we feel like they have an ethical obligation due to their own pollution from production to kind of give back to the community in this sense with a clean water infrastructure pipeline.
I see. Okay, that cleared it up. Hal, do you have any questions?
About your, give me an explanation of how you decided the particular place that you located, Kerala. You could have chosen the Mumbai area, you could have chosen Delhi, where there are existing infrastructure projects, as well as, and I'm making assumptions, of course, that they are also in Kerala. But could you tell me why you chose Kerala over other parts of India, and there is a difference in comparison between a state in India than somewhere in a different culture and a different kind of situation. Could you explain that a little more?
Thank you for your question, Hal. I'm gonna take this one. And you kind of hit it on the head when you talked about New Delhi and their existing infrastructure there. Kerala is in a very interesting spot in India. They're on the southern portion of the subcontinent. So there's no border dispute. There's no issues when it comes to creating an infrastructure place there. But right now you have 33 million people who don't have access to an existing infrastructure network. We see projects like that are happening in New Delhi right now as something where you're expanding on existing infrastructure, whereas there's a huge portion and a sizable percentage of this population who does not have access to clean drinking water. During our research, we found that about 85% of families in India have access to clean drinking water, whereas in the state of Kerala, it's about 30%. And so that's an unequitable situation that we're seeing. And we see, as you guys being the Bisleri board of directors and being the foremost water provider in India, this is something where you'd be able to make a real actionable difference on and helping the families that exist within that state.
Thank you.
Anything else, Al?
No, I think that's one question. I'll come back if there's other questions. Thank you.
Okay. Lynn, it's your turn. We have no Joe. As you know, once we finish the question period, we move into the feedback period. I would like you to transition smoothly into the feedback period when you finish your questions, and then we'll go on back up the list and I'll finish it off. So if you could take it right now.
Sure. So I did have a couple of questions to ask, and I wanted to clarify. First of all, I'll say that I'm all in with the social considerations here and your presentation on the need. I did want to ask you, did you state early on in your presentation that after this project is fully completed, that the ownership goes back to the government?
Yes, we did say that.
And is there a concern, or I may have a concern, I expect I should say, about my intellectual property going into this that the government, of course, might then own? Is there plans to protect intellect by Bisleri that we are putting into this project?
Yes, while like the ownership rights will go back to the public government, Bisleri will still be consulted on regular like operations and maintenance, as they were the ones who found the people who did the construction and the operations and maintenance. So it's mainly just a case of oversight, mainly being back on in the Indian government side. But it's important to remember that the Indian government was always step by step with Bisleri throughout the whole process. So even though the ownership rights go back, they more or less have the same role they had before of just continuing oversight and ensuring that the infrastructure stays in place and stays sustainable and consistent.
And so from a contractual standpoint, I'd be concerned a bit that the government may choose to take my intellectual property that came about as a result of this project and provide it to someone else who they thought might be a better partner to them in the future.
Well, I mean, that'll be something that have to be discussed in the original like contract with the private sector of Bisleri and the government. Traditionally, the contracts are 20 years, and there are plans, or they're all subsections of the plans that do say that, if there's any other further issues with this infrastructure, you do come back to the same company. So I think that is something that could be addressed early on when having negotiations, to say that, hey, we will give you the rights back, but if you ever need any help or assistance in the future, you can't just go to another water company. You have to come back to us. So that's something that could be hashed out in the beginning.
Okay, and just from a government oversight standpoint, you had mentioned that there's price gouging with bottled water at this time. Does the government ever evaluate putting in place laws to restrict price gouging on bottled water?
Yeah, that is actually something I did do research on. The issue is that the laws are inconsistent from state to state on price gouging. There isn't really like a national law that stops it from happening. And from the article I read, it was in 2019 when price gouging was still happening. So I think this was an issue of, just whatever political considerations that, the regular citizen can't control. So that's why we wanted to have the clean water infrastructure as an alternative to the bottled water, because we don't want the issues of corruption and, like price gouging to affect the regular citizens' right to water.
Okay. And in the end, you would ultimately want the bottled water to be secondary to this system?
Well, we hope that there's simply just two options available now, which is bottled water and the public water infrastructure. And we believe that with this competition, so to say, it would drive down the cost of bottled water and it would force them not to price gouge because they have a cheaper alternative. So we just want to have the careless citizen to have more options available for water. And we want both of them to be safe water, because the bottled water previously was safe water, but the actual public water was not safe and clean.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Those are my only questions.
Okay, can you go into the feedback mode now?
I can. And I love that last answer, right? Because you talked a lot about how this system would drive competition in the industry to mitigate the secondary water source or the other water source in the bottled water. So thank you for that. I thought that was very positive. I am happy to see that you're not reading slides. The slides are there for us to review and obviously to listen to a broader content that you want to offer to us. So I thought that was great. I love the alignment of your mission and values up front. I do believe that was very positive. The one thing that I kind of put down as a bit of a negative is you addressed early on that that we are, the company, is causing harm, right, with the environment, and that we have an obligation because we ourselves are causing harm. And I think that's a very strong position to take when you're trying to get a company on board, right? You're kind of hitting them with the fact that, hey, you guys are responsible for this, so you have to come on board with us, right? And that's how I interpreted that. So I would say, sometimes you get further with, with a more positive approach to why they should be joining in this PPP project versus, hey, you guys did wrong, but we still want you to come on board, right? That was my only negative.
Hal, what do you
Yes,
have?
thank you. I was very impressed with the presentation, and I thought all of you did a very good job of taking a particular segment of the presentation and developing it. Strength, I think, of this is the fact that you did go into the finance area, and it was very effective. And I liked it when I asked the question that I wish could have been drawn out a little more in the beginning of why you chose Kerala over other places, because there were many opportunities and candidate places. And for a model, for a business model that you were using, I thought that was very well done in the follow-up to the question. I think the area that there was somewhat of a weakness was that there was we were listening, or we were concentrating so much on the slides and trying to concentrate at the same time on your words in your presentation. And so that was something that could be improved on in the future for another session. And the final thing is that I think there was one area where it could have been fleshed out a little more, and that was the relationship between Modi and the present government and the development of jobs and the development in particular areas of India, and the political and economic impact on how this would be affecting that, and if there was more consideration of the political aspects by Modi, or why were they going to go along with this project. And so I think that's something that could have been summarized a little better. But overall, I thought it was a very good presentation. And I think the fact of all the research, especially into the place that you chose originally as the model, was quite good. So thank you.
Okay, it's my turn, and then when I'm done, we're done. I thought it was a good presentation. I learned some things. It was factually intense. In that respect, it was good. Just to show you how you can find conflict on boards of directors, I disagree with what Lynn said. I would have rather been insulted and offended by you calling me for what I am, which is a greedy privateer. I would have listened to that, and I would have taken it to heart. I would not have been offended. And if you're right, you should never be afraid of that as you go through life. The presentation has at the end, and we are now at the end, some subtleties of logic. But I had to strain for those. I had to work at it and ask you that question that I asked you. I'm a fairly quick study. I shouldn't have had to do that. You should have put it together more seamlessly so that it was jumping off the page at me. And that would be my criticism. Other than that, good presentation and good luck in your career.